Have you ever found yourself wondering, about the next person in line? About who steps up when the unexpected happens? The truly unthinkable.
Mm.
It's a question that it can make you pause, right?
Mhm.
But it's also fundamental to how our governments are designed, that whole idea of continuity.
Absolutely essential.
So today, we're diving deep into a question that's been on a lot of minds recently, one that really brings this idea right to the forefront. Is Vice President JD Vance genuinely prepared to assume the presidency, like right now?
It's a big question.
It is. And this question, well, the analysis we've looked at shows it really gained traction after all that online speculation about President Trump's health.
Right, those rumors were swirling.
Exactly.
Right?
And that then led to Vance's public statement, do you remember? About being ready to step in if tragedy strikes.
I do. And that comment, it definitely landed differently depending on who you asked.
For sure. Reassured some, but certainly worried others. Prompted a much closer look at his readiness. So our mission for this deep dive is really to try and cut through some of that noise. We've gathered a stack of sources, articles, detailed analysis, you name it, to explore both sides of this crucial debate. We want to give you a comprehensive understanding of what's truly being said about his preparedness, his track record, and the, frankly, unique challenges he'd face.
Yeah, and what's fascinating looking at the material is how his relatively short time in that VP role has already created such different perceptions.
It really has.
It's an absolutely fascinating area to explore, especially given the immense weight of the office and just how suddenly a VP can be propelled into that top job. The sources we've looked at really illustrate that Vance has been quite deliberate in his efforts, trying to define his role, establish his presence since taking office.
Just sitting back.
No, definitely not. And examining these key moments, these sort of defining moments, offers a crucial lens, not just for his potential, but also the broader political landscape he's operating in.
Okay, let's start with one of those moments, the one that really put him on the global stage. The Munich Security Conference earlier this year.
Ah, yes, Munich.
Vance delivered a pretty high-profile speech there, and it made headlines, didn't it, for its unvarnished tone. Some might even say confrontational.
It definitely wasn't standard diplomatic language as some parts.
No, he didn't shy away from directly criticizing European immigration policies.
Yeah.
So what did that specific outing tell us about his approach to global diplomacy?
Well, what's really illuminating there is the reaction, just how starkly contrasting it was. And what that tells us about how we evaluate leadership now, Supporters looked at it and saw clear proof he could stand toe-to-toe with global leaders.
Showing strength.
Exactly. Demonstrating a strong, assertive American stance, prioritizing national interests. That was the take. But conversely, a significant number of critics felt it was, quote, unnecessarily combative.
Yeah, okay.
And they seriously questioned his diplomatic tact. They argued that, a forum like Munich demands more nuance, more careful engagement.
So it reveals this fundamental split, doesn't it? Is leadership today about projecting raw strength, or is it about building that nuanced consensus?
Precisely. And
Yeah.
maybe how much that first impression then shapes how everything else he does gets interpreted.
Yeah, that divided lens seems to pop up again and again with him. Does that suggest that for someone like Vance coming into this really polarized environment, even a clear policy statement just gets viewed through partisan filters, making it hard to judge his actual skill objectively?
I think it absolutely does. And we saw that pattern again during his subsequent international tour.
The one where he visited India and Italy.
That's the one. Often with his family, blending official duties with a more personal, public-facing approach, it really seemed to challenge the traditional ideas of what high-level statecraft is supposed to look like.
So that tour then became another lightning rod. This debate about public persona versus, actual policy work. How did that play out?
Exactly like you'd expect, given the Munich reaction. Admirers praised this blend. They called it diplomacy and accessibility.
Okay, making him seem relatable.
Yeah, seeing him as both a serious statesman and a relatable figure, someone who could connect personally on a global level. The message was sort of, here's a leader who gets the big picture and the human element.
But the other side?
The detractors were quick to argue it looked more like a publicity trip than serious statecraft.
Ah, so style over substance in their view.
That was the critique, suggesting the focus was more on image, maybe domestic political appeal, than on the substantive grind of foreign policy. It just highlights that ongoing tension, doesn't it, between projecting a carefully curated image and actually demonstrating tangible policy wins internationally.
It's fascinating how the exact same actions can be spun or at least interpreted so differently. And it wasn't just on the international stage he was trying to find his role. Domestically, he also made a pretty significant push, particularly in Wisconsin, right? A key battleground state.
Yes, Wisconsin was notable.
We saw him there promoting the administration's working families tax cut, really positioning himself as a champion for, well, middle-class relief.
And again, the sources show that familiar division in how it was received.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
Supporters loved it. Critics were skeptical.
You got it. For his supporters, this was solid proof he could connect with everyday Americans. Showed he understood their economic worries. It helped solidify that image as a voice for people who feel overlooked. But skeptics, they viewed it quite differently. Dismissed it as a shallow campaign move rather than genuine policy leadership.
So just political optics.
That was the argument, suggesting it was more about positioning for the future, maybe, than impactful governance or deep policy work right now. It really makes you ask, what is genuine leadership in today's domestic arena? Everything seems like a campaign move to someone.
Right. So we've looked at how Vance presents himself, his style, and these conflicting reactions. But beyond the image, there's that specific policy stance you mentioned earlier, the one that really ignited the debate, what the sources call the polemic moment of 2025. This seemed to really shape perceptions of his actual policy direction.
It did. It was arguably one of his most controversial moments as VP.
Remind us what that was exactly.
This was the moment when Vance publicly questioned whether U.S. aid commitments abroad, especially to Ukraine, should continue at their current levels.
Ah, yes. That definitely made waves.
Huge waves. It was a very direct challenge to what had become sort of established foreign policy dogma. And it absolutely divided opinion, shaking up traditional alliances and expectations.
It certainly did. On one side, you had his supporters praising him, arguing he was prioritizing American interests.
Speaking for voters tired of costly foreign entanglements.
They saw it as pragmatic, maybe refreshing, putting American taxpayers first.
That was the view. But then, on the other side, the critics sounded a pretty stark warning.
What was their main concern?
They cautioned that his stance risked undermining U.S. credibility with allies, especially what they saw as a very delicate geopolitical moment.
So potentially destabilizing things when solidarity was needed.
That was the fear. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, this moment really encapsulates the whole debate around him, doesn't it? It highlights both his perceived boldness, this willingness to break from the established way, and, as some argue, his inexperience, particularly when it comes to the tricky balance of global diplomacy and managing alliances.
Yeah, this is where the debate gets really sharp. How can the same stance be seen as both a bold strength, for people wanting a new direction, and also a huge vulnerability for those prioritizing established norms and alliances?
It cuts right to the core. How different people define effective leadership, especially in foreign policy. What risks are acceptable?
And another crucial factor that comes up a lot in these discussions is, well, the material we looked at calls it the age factor.
Right. His age.
Vance, at 40, would be one of the youngest presidents in U.S. history if you were to step into the role.
That's a key point, and it immediately makes you think about history, doesn't it?
It does. Comparisons come to mind.
John F. Kennedy, for instance. He was 43 when elected. Theodore Roosevelt actually became president at just 42 after McKinley's assassination.
Wow, even younger.
And more recently, Bill Clinton was 46, Barack Obama 47 when they first entered office. So there's definitely precedent for younger leaders taking the highest office in America.
And those examples, they aren't just statistical outliers, are they? History does show us that youth can mean, well, incredible energy, fresh ideas, bringing new perspectives to old problems.
Absolutely. There can be a dynamism there that's incredibly valuable, especially when things are changing fast.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Well, as our sources point out, the critics of Vance argue that while youth can bring dynamism, it can also mean less seasoned experience.
Ah, the experience question again.
Exactly. They specifically highlight Vance's few years in the Senate and less than a year as VP as a potential risk. The argument is that his resume might be, well, a bit thin for the sheer complexity of the presidency.
So it raises that question. What kind of prior experience is really essential? Is it just years served? Or the intensity of the roles?
That's the debate. Is it about length of service, or is it about the specific challenges faced and overcome?
So it's more than just a number, his age. It's about age combined with his specific career path in this political moment and what that implies for the huge challenges a president faces.
Right. Are we looking for a very traditional resume? or a set of qualities, maybe a capacity for rapid learning, that can show up in different ways.
Which brings us right to the heart of it. The readiness debate itself, the central question of this whole deep dive. The analysis we've seen lays out the arguments for and against his preparedness pretty clearly. Let's maybe look at the case for Vance being ready first.
Okay. The arguments in favor are compelling in their own way, and they often hinge on the unique nature of the vice presidency itself. Proponents suggest that the VP role is the ultimate on-the-job training.
Like an apprenticeship for the presidency.
In a way, yeah. They point to his 200-plus days of daily briefings, security updates, cabinet meetings. The idea is these aren't just administrative tasks. They're the very mechanism designed to prepare a VP, giving them unparalleled immersion in national security, domestic policy, everything.
So the argument is the vice presidency itself is this intensive learning curve built for exactly this scenario.
That's the core of it. And beyond that immersion, they'd say, he's already shown confidence on the world stage, like at Munich, depending on your view, and energy on the campaign trail.
Qualities you definitely need as president. Communicating, rallying support.
Undeniably vital. And then there's also the personal connection piece.
His backstory. From Hillbilly Elegy.
Exactly. That's often cited as giving him a deep, sort of visceral connection to parts of America that feel left behind. That's seen as a major asset for understanding and maybe representing a broad part of the country, speaking authentically to them.
Okay, that's a strong case for readiness.
Okay.
Emphasizing the unique training of the job and his specific attributes. But then, of course, there's the other side of the coin. What are the key arguments against Vance's readiness right now, based on the sources?
The counter-arguments often zero in on a perceived lack of specific, high-level executive experience.
Meaning actually running something big, like a state or a major department.
Precisely. Critics argue he lacks deep executive experience compared to past VPs who became president suddenly. They often bring up figures like LBJ or Harry Truman.
Right. LBJ was a powerhouse in the Senate. Truman had been a senator and VP.
Exactly. They had extensive backgrounds, different kinds of operational and legislative mastery, you could say. The critique is that Vance just hasn't had that kind of administrative command experience yet.
And we talked about his diplomatic style earlier that comes up again here as a concern too, right? Those controversial foreign policy comments.
It does. His remarks, like the stance on Ukraine aid, are specifically highlighted. They raise doubts about his diplomatic skill, according to critics. You know, a president's ability to navigate incredibly complex international stuff without alienating key allies is just paramount. And those moments led some to question his capacity in that really sensitive arena, especially if a crisis hit.
Okay. And finally, there's sort of a summary point that ties these threads together about his overall experience level. What's the ultimate worry for those who doubt he's ready?
Critics often conclude that at 40, he could become the least tested modern president. That his resume, as they see it, is still thin.
Least tested?
Yeah. And this isn't just about the number of years, but the type of executive leadership experience they feel is needed to immediately step into being commander-in-chief and a global leader. It really raises that fundamental question, relevant for any leader, but maybe especially for Vance. How do you weigh rapid immersion and, say, natural aptitude against that historical precedent of extensive prior executive experience, particularly in a world demanding immediate, decisive action?
It's a fundamental tension. No easy answer there.
None at all. It defines this entire debate.
And that tension really is the crux of it all, isn't it? Our deep dive into these sources shows us a system that is designed for continuity. Legally, there's no debate. If tragedy struck, JD Vance would become president instantly.
The mechanism is clear. The Constitution provides for it.
Right. The system ensures continuity, not necessarily a pause for assessment or a choice.
Precisely. But politically, practically, as all the analysis we've looked at makes clear, the jury is definitely out.
It really is. On one hand, you have those who see him as a young, dynamic leader in training, someone who's quickly absorbed the huge responsibilities of the VP job and is, poised for that next step. They'd point to his intellect, his drive.
The ready-to-learn, quick-study argument.
And then on the other hand, there are those who view him as untested, unseasoned, someone thrust into a role that, according to them, he hasn't quite earned yet through a long enough track record, especially in the executive branch.
Right, raising concerns about the sheer weight of the global and domestic challenges he'd immediately inherit with perhaps not enough runs on the board, so to speak.
So ultimately, the real question isn't just, is he legally ready now through the process?
Yeah.
but maybe whether Americans and, frankly, the world are truly ready for him.
A deeper question about perception and trust, really.
Yeah. What stands out to you, like listening to all this about this really complex picture? And maybe what does it tell us about the qualities we value most, or perhaps should value most, in our leaders today, especially in this era of, well, unprecedented challenges?